to be debated on bar stools until the end of time. However, for hockey fans, there isn't much debate. None at all, in fact. The greatest season in NHL history was unquestionably the 1992-93 campaign. A season so wild, so jam-packed with major storylines, and ultimately so monumental that it still doesn't compute to this day. As the 1990s got underway, the NHL had no illusions about its place in the American sports consciousness. High-ranking officials even admitted that the NHL wasn't in the same league as the three other major sports in terms of popularity or revenue, but they were trying hard to change that. The NHL embarked on an expansion blitz in the early 90s, introducing the San Jose Sharks in 91-92, before adding two new franchises the following season, the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Ottawa Senators. The following year, they'd add two more, in Anaheim and Florida. And in the midst of that expansion effort, the NHL was gifted a season for the ages, a ridiculously compelling year of hockey that helped push the NHL to a new level of popularity. Really though, the indelible 92-93 campaign, which happened to mark the 100th anniversary of the Stanley Cup, actually began months before the season got underway. First, just weeks after the Lightning and Senators were born in the summer of '92, an epic trade shook up the landscape of the league in a profound way and was perhaps a harbinger of the craziness to come. With recently drafted phenom Eric Lindros refusing to play for Quebec, who had taken him with the #1 overall pick in the 1991 entry draft, the Nordiques swung a blockbuster trade to send the teenage sensation to Philadelphia for an absolute motherlode. A haul that included a recently drafted junior named Peter Forsberg, plus Ron Hextall, Mike Ricci, Steve Duchesne, and multiple first-round draft picks. Even though Forsberg was still 2 years away from joining the club, the deal instantly bolstered a Nordiques team that had missed the playoffs 5 years in a row and gave the scuffling Flyers a generational talent to build around. Ultimately, the drama and controversy surrounding that summer blockbuster, and the hype around Lindros specifically, whet the appetite of hockey fans in a major way. But the preseason excitement didn't end there. Rather, that September, in a landmark moment for hockey and professional sports, a woman took the ice in an NHL game. Manon Rome, a 20-year-old netminder who would go on to become an Olympic silver medalist, tended goal for the Tampa Bay Lightning in an exhibition contest, becoming the first woman to appear in a game in any of the Big Four North American pro sports leagues. This was history, truly transformative stuff, and the season hadn't even started yet. There was more history to be made, much more. First, right out of the gate in 92-93, which by the way marked the beginning of the short-lived 84-game regular season, something was up. Scoring. After 2 straight seasons of declining scoring, that trend came to a screeching halt. In 92-93, scoring jumped more than 4% year over year. The biggest increase since 81-82, the year that Wayne Gretzky became the first player in NHL history to record 200 points in a season. Zooming out a bit, the inflated goal-scoring environment of 92-93 was really just a blip in hockey's steady evolution away from the ridiculously offense-forward game of the 1980s. But in the moment, that scoring explosion was a sight to behold, and everyone was getting in on the action. A month into the season, 20 different players were averaging at least 1.5 points per game. The most exceptional among them, though? Super Mario, of course. After leading the league in scoring in 3 of the previous 5 seasons, Mario Lemieux took his game to another level in 92-93. With his Pittsburgh Penguins looking for a Stanley Cup three-peat, Lemieux was unstoppable from day one, putting up an unfathomable 50 points through his first 18 games. 50! Even in an offense-friendly environment, it beggared belief. Little did everyone know, however, just how remarkable Lemieux's season would ultimately be. More on him later. Because he wasn't the only standout breaking everyone's brains with his ridiculously prolific scoring. In Winnipeg, a 22-year-old rookie was doing the same. Teemu Selanne, who had been drafted by the Jets 4 years earlier but had remained in his native Finland to complete his mandatory military service, was making it abundantly clear that he was worth the wait. He wasn't merely outclassing every other rookie. Rather, in his first taste of NHL action, he was one of the most prolific goal scorers in the entire league. Selanne scored at least once in 8 of his first 11 games, netted his first NHL hat-trick barely a week into his career, and just didn't stop. By Christmas, the Finnish Flash had 8 more goals than the league's second most prolific rookie, and he was gunning hard for the league lead in that department. His greatest adversary? It wasn't Lemieux or Pavel Bure or Luc Robitaille. It was actually Alexander Mogilny, a gifted young winger who positively exploded in his 4th NHL season, averaging roughly a goal per game. Not a point per game, a goal per game. At one point, the 23-year-old Sabre star recorded 3 hat tricks in a 4-game span. On his off night, he scored 2. And to this day, Mogilny remains one of just 9 players ever to score 11 or more goals in a 4-game span. Now I know what you're thinking. Why haven't they mentioned Wayne Gretzky yet? Well, it's because number 99 was out of commission for the first half of the 92-93 campaign. A back injury delayed his debut until after New Year's and ultimately limited him to a career-low 45 games. Consequently, for the first time in his NHL career, Gretzky failed to record 100 points, and that season is widely considered the beginning of the end of his singular career. Get this though, just as the Great One made his long-awaited return in January, the Magnificent One's historic season was tragically interrupted. Seemingly out of nowhere, Lemieux, who had racked up an astonishing 104 points through 40 games and was flirting with Gretzky's single-season points record, was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, a type of cancer that attacks the lymphatic system. Doctors were optimistic about his recovery thanks to early detection, but Lemieux would be out of action while receiving radiation treatment 5 times a week. His absence and the uncertainty about his future put a damper over what had been a remarkable season to that point, but the show went on with Lemieux sidelined. And as the season's second half unfolded, there was no shortage of gripping storylines. Like, for instance, the battle for supremacy between Quebec's 2 franchises, the formidable Montreal Canadiens and the resurgent Nordiques, both of whom were clearly headed for the playoffs. Meanwhile, on the other end of the spectrum, there was the historic futility of the NHL's newer franchises, including the second-year Sharks, who at one point tied an NHL record with 17 consecutive losses on their way to an 11-win season. The craziest part though? The first-year Senators were somehow worse, mustering only 10 wins. And while all this was going on, big things were happening for the NHL at the executive level too. In February of '93, Gary Bettman, who had spent more than a decade as a leading figure in the NBA league office, officially became the first commissioner of the NHL, kickstarting a tenure as the league's chief executive that's still going more than 3 decades later. Anyway, back to Lemieux. Initially, his doctors had said there was a chance he might make it back for the playoffs. But after less than 8 weeks away from the Penguins, the superstar was somehow ready to return to the ice. And after undergoing his final radiation treatment on the morning of March 2nd, Lemieux chartered a private plane to take him from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia, where he arrived just in time to make it for the Penguins' showdown against their interstate rival. There, in the hostile environs of Philadelphia, Lemieux was treated to a thunderous ovation when he stepped onto the ice.
Lemieux missed 23 games.
Well, whether they were standing already or not, this is a standing ovation for Mario Lemieux here at the Spectrum, and it's nice to see.
And naturally, in his first competitive action in 2 months, after 22 rounds of radiation treatment, Lemieux was the best player on the ice, scoring and adding an assist to announce his emphatic return to the Art Ross race. At the time, Sabres captain Pat LaFontaine, Mogilny's line mate in Buffalo, was sitting pretty atop the points leaderboard, which by March already had 5 players in triple digits. But soon enough, Lemieux reclaimed his rightful spot at the top of that leaderboard. And his late-season surge not only capped the most incredible comeback in hockey history, but it also fueled the longest winning streak the NHL has ever seen. With Lemieux back in action, the Penguins effectively closed out the 92-93 season with an unprecedented 17-game winning streak. After falling to New York in Lemieux's second game back from cancer, the Penguins didn't lose a game for the remainder of the regular season, riding a historic hot streak to a franchise record and NHL best 56 wins, and comfortably securing the number 1 seed in the Prince of Wales Conference. Over the course of those 17 wins, by the way, Lemieux racked up a mind-boggling 51 points, a run that left LaFontaine in his dust and ultimately helped Super Mario secure his 4th of 6 career scoring titles. All told, he put up 160 points in 60 games. At 2.67 points per game, Lemieux's season, which again was interrupted by cancer, was the